Okay. So quick word on these pictures you're going to see. You notice that there is, at the top of there's 0.8 of a host. So these are version distribution of some app that I'm going to talk about. Here are the most recent versions here. You know, your latest betas and release candidates all the way down to stuff that's very, very old. You know, depending on how old the project is, several years old or 10 years old. And then across going, the bars represent how many hosts we found running those versions. So since, remember, we're talking about sets of possibilities, if we fingerprinted host 1 and got back, we can't pin it down specifically, but we know that it's running one of these 3 versions, then each of those columns gets 0.33. We go and fingerprint host 2, and we say the possible versions are 1.5 or 2.0. Then we do 1 over n to that column, and then finally host 3. We actually pin it down to a specific version, so the full 1.0 or 1 over 1 to that column. So here's basically the X-ray of that previous chart. So we are representing the fact that we can only infer sort of sets of possibilities, but it lets us put all the data on the chart and not misrepresent anything. So okay, here's what we found. Whole bunch of Drupal machines in this version distribution. You'll notice there's kind of this sort of swoop here that it's very few people are running the truly ancient versions and comes up and then spikes and comes back down to sort of this bell curve type thing within about the last 3 to 8 versions. So keep an eye on that trend. It will show up a lot. Also notice a couple of these little spikes here. They will also show up a lot, and we'll discuss why that is. So here's the distribution of people running Drupal. You can see most are in the 614, 615, 613 range. Drupal has some vulnerabilities. Obviously, we know about them. They publish those. So some % of these people are running a version that is affected by known critical or serious vulnerabilities. Not everyone falls beyond that threshold, obviously. So the question for you guys is, what % of people, these are your random hosts on the internet, are running something that is vulnerable to a remote critical exploit? Raise your hand if you think less than 50%. You guys are realists. Obviously more than 50%. How about if you guys think between 50 and 75? Raise your hand. Couple? Come on. More than 75? There we go. More than 80? Okay. So 70% there. These, you can see pretty much any of these people running the old versions are definitely going to be vulnerable. But these people who are kind of here in the middle of the pack in this bell curve, it comes up and bisects right through that bell curve. So if you sort of thought you were running with the pack, you're probably behind. Also notice these couple of spikes. These are hosting providers and package managers that are not providing a version that is up to date enough to keep you away from these critical vulnerabilities. This is, if you grab the slides, the actual vulnerabilities are in there. So anybody running a version less than 6.16 was vulnerable to this. All right, how about Joomla? Less than 50%? Somebody, I heard 90? 90? Nice. That 92% of Joomla users out there are running a version that is affected by this vulnerability or something farther down the line, which is just astonishing to me. And these are well-known published vulnerabilities. Like the vendor has said, here, update your software. Here's a fixed version. Don't run this stuff anymore. And still 92% of people don't update. I'm not saying anything surprising if I say users don't update. I may be saying something a little more surprising if I say website administrators don't update, but not hugely surprising there. But it's staggering to me how far behind all of these guys are. Liferay, I'm not going to pick on them. They're too small. Mediawiki? 95%. At some point, you're just like, the numbers are going to be disappointing, and it goes up. You can see definitely the spikes from the package managers and the hosting providers are right here. So if you're relying on those package managers or those hosting providers to protect you, you're very much not being protected. Well, you may be, but just not soon enough. All right, Moodle, 74%. Movable type, there you go, 91%. And ouch, these guys who were right here on the, thought you were running with a really popular version. As I look at this, I'm trying to sort of figure out why people end up being behind, whether it's the pain of updating or whether they're chasing a particular feature, or in some cases with something like this, plugins may be holding people back. But if you are PHPBB. So this is perhaps a little bit not fair because basically the day that I did the scanning, this was coming out, so people hadn't upgraded to the latest version. But that's a truism of operating machines in the real world. At some point, awful stuff like this is going to happen. But if I go back and scan right now, do you guys really think that this will have moved above the line? No, it's, we'll have a little bit of uptake going along here. There's more research to be done here on coming back a week later, a month later. I haven't done that. I'd like to, but we got time constraints. PHP Nuke, it's a forked project. I'm not going to pick on them. Here's the weird one to me. PHPMyAdmin. If your blog goes down, that's not awful. So maybe you'll risk doing the sort of the change management problems of updating that, or if your CMS maybe has some issues, you can, if you think the upgrade process might be a little bit hairy, you can do it in the middle of the night. But it seems like if something is critical, if PHPMyAdmin is your database management solution at your work, you get it working and you don't touch it. That's the story that I get from this spikes all over the place of essentially popular versions that people have stayed on. Everybody else had that nice curve that went kind of from here all the way up to here. PHPMyAdmin very, very much not so. What do you guys think? Percentage-wise? 100%? And that hurts, if some you can use a blog or something like that to get into a site and then pivot from there. But this is like, hey, directly into your database, and it's not any better. People are sort of system administrators aren't doing any triage about what's going to cause real problems. It's just people don't update. Again, nothing too shocking there. SPIP, a French CMS, 65%, a little bit better. Here's something interesting. WordPress. Now, conventional wisdom has been, if you go out there and read, that WordPress has awful security. You'll hear people saying this over and over, oh, I couldn't possibly run WordPress. Their security is dismal. But certainly one thing that their users are doing is absolutely keeping up to date. Remember when I was talking back at the beginning about these very easy to install apps and ease of use, ease of use, ease of use? Their WordPress has their famous one-click install and their famous one-click update, and it's really reliable. If you run WordPress, you probably found out that when a new version comes out, you can maybe back up your tables, but you can usually expect the install to work. And I think we see that here. I think that a rabid focus on ease of use and predictability and all that kind of stuff truly does drive user behavior. So anyway, if you're looking for hard numbers to talk about, if we make it 5% easier for our users to apply patches, will we see that, or how far do we have to go to get this kind of up-to-dateness? I really like this spike here as a security person. I love to see people running, and this was the most recent version until right before I did the scan. You can see that they're in the release candidates for 3.0 when I did this scan. But this is great. So based on that, what do you guys think for published known vulnerabilities against WordPress that people are vulnerable? Less than 50%? More than 50%? What's that? 65. Less than 65? More than 65? Tough crowd. So a couple of things could possibly contribute to that. I think helping people update really contributes to that. The other thing is they've had a number of vulnerabilities. They've had some serious problems with actually at one point somebody broke in and tainted some of the code that was set up for release. But they've done a pretty good job of helping people update, telling them to update, making it very obvious in the administrative UI that you need to update, and here's how you do it. So good driving of user behavior. So that's very cool. Good on WordPress for doing that. Good on anybody who makes it easy for their users to stay secure. On the other hand, there is something else that could contribute to this metric, which is WordPress doesn't have any formal security notification policy. All the rest of these ones that I showed you did. You can go to Joomla and look up what are all the Joomla advisories. You can go to Drupal and look up what are all the Drupal advisories. You can't for WordPress. So good on them for one thing, very much bad on them for another. So it could be that there is something more recent than that I have no way of finding out about it. I Googled, I checked some things, but so definitely a story of yes, but no. So if anybody works on WordPress here, come up and chat with me afterwards. I'd love to help get you guys going with that. Certainly as vulnerability researchers, as vulnerability management people, make our jobs so much easier. All right, so just because I had to pick on them a little bit, I said, okay, what about medium vulnerabilities? This is medium based on any of the rating systems out there. So 21.5%. Even if we go down to mediums, I think this is if you are an author on the blog, then somebody can trick you into inserting script. So there's some more significant conditions for this one. But yeah, so that's kind of cool for WordPress. So anyway, hopefully contravening a little bit of conventional wisdom and salvaging their reputation there. I am not paid by WordPress. So version clusters. Obviously, we said we're talking about sets of possibilities. And it makes sense that there are some versions that are going to be more difficult to distinguish. So here is sort of a visualization of that. Any of these lines that are going back and forth mean that when we did these scans, there was a scan that came up that said, hey, I know it's version 1.3.11, 12, 13, 14, 15, or 18, but I can't tell. So that we returned that version set instead of a specific version. So you can see from time to time we get these little groups of versions that get confused. More lines, thicker lines means that happen more often. But even in the worst case scenario, we end up pinning it down to 3, 4 versions. So that's sort of the graph of how accurate we're often going to be for Mediawiki. For Drupal, found more of those, so just sort of thicker lines in general. But you can kind of see this segmentation forming. Don't look at any individual details, just look at where the hemispheres start coming up. SPIP, we can do a pretty good job on that. We generally pin it right down, except for that one cluster over there. But you can see that those are all release candidates, so it's no surprise that we get those confused all the time. So a couple of war stories. Sometimes you see this data and you just have to go digging into the story behind it. This is a WordPress blog that was running an astonishingly out-of-date version. And so I was looking at it, and this is a guy who's got lots of big talk about security and Russian hackers. He's vying for the sanctity of his website with these Russian hackers who keep putting stuff up on there. And I said, well, that's really weird. Fingerprint him. It doesn't show up. But yeah, he's 6 years behind on his updates. So I think he was one of the only people who was that far behind. I was astonished. So some people